Hey guys, welcome back to another exciting week of the Shipmate YouTube channel. This week we're talking all about pallets. That's right, it's a pallet palooza. So guys, today we're talking all about pallets. They're really important in warehousing, transportation. If you're selling online or you run a store, you've encountered pallets because pallets are how things are moved in this country. Pallets began way back in ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia, mostly with skid-like objects that would hold, mass amounts of things, because even back then, there was a need to store things in bulk. So these skids were not like modern pallets, you couldn't run a pallet jack under them or a forklift, but they allowed you to set things on top of them, and move things in mass on carts or whatever. So fast forward up until the Industrial Revolution in the 1800s, and you see a lot of improvements in skid technology and the way things are moved. We now have barrels, cardboard boxes, wooden crates, all different kinds of ways to move things. And then in 1924, Howard Hallowell invented the lift truck, and this changed things because now there was a way to pick up an entire skid and move it around the warehouse floor. And this led to more innovations. So the modern pallet was actually invented in 1938 when George Raymond invented what is essentially the modern pallet jack or forklift. And this is really when you see a modernization in pallets to the more modern design of, a deck and then some stringers and then another deck. So this is really when you see the modern pallet take shape. Now that we know where a pallet came from, I want to talk about the two main designs of pallets, right? So you got stringer pallets and block pallets. A stringer pallet is usually comprised of an upper deck, two horizontal stringers, and then a lower deck. This kind of pallet has access for the forks on two sides and then access for a pallet jack on the other two sides. So this is what you see with a standard pallet in a standard warehouse. But there are also block pallets, right? So block pallets have a lower deck and an upper deck held together by strong compressed wooden blocks. And these kind of pallets are often square pallets, and they can hold a whole lot more weight. And you can get the forks in there from any angle. You get the pallet jack in there from any angle. So they're very versatile. And this is another kind of common pallet you will see in a warehousing setting. And then you also have double face pallets. And these can be reversible or not reversible. But imagine having two decks instead of one deck. And by having that second deck, you can flip the pallet over and use it on the other side. And it gives a lot more stability. So these pallets can hold a lot more weight than your standard everyday stringer pallet. There's also double wing pallets. These are those funny looking pallets where the deck sticks out over the sides of the board or the stringer on the side. And, it can kind of look like it has wings, and that's why they're called a double wing pallet. These are very rare, but you do see them in certain industrial applications. And then finally, the fifth type of pallet we're going to talk about is solid deck pallets. And you see a lot of times a solid deck pallet is a pallet that the deck is solid. It's one piece. It's usually made up of plywood or some sort of board. And this is really good because it can be kept clean. It's very eye appealing. It's sanitary. You can broom it off. You can, clean it very easily compared to, just wooden boards going across. So this might cost a little more. It uses a little more material, but it's a very eye appealing pallet, and that is why you see it sometimes in grocery stores or places where pallets are visible. Next, I want to talk about standard pallet sizes. So in the US, the standard pallet is 48 by 40 inches, right? So it's a rectangular pallet, and this is pretty much the standard, but we also have square pallets here in the United States. Square pallets are usually 42 by 42, and these are those pallets that are usually accessible from all four sides. And like I said, they're usually block pallets, so they hold a lot more weight. But every country is different, and especially across continents. So, you got European pallets, you got Asian pallets, you got Australian pallets. And these are all different, especially because these countries are on the metric system, where the US operates on the standard system. And because of this, there is some fluctuation, even if it's a couple inches in the size of the pallet, and that can affect the equipment and the trailers and everything with those kind of measurements. So it's important to know that there are other types of pallets you can encounter that are not the standard American pallet that you see every day behind your local grocery store. We're going to talk about pallet grading. So if you're buying used pallets, you've probably heard the term 1, 2, or 3 grade, A, B, or C grade pallets. And I want to give you a little bit of a background on what those are. So an A grade pallet is like new with minimal damage. It's got great eye appeal. It looks almost new. The boards aren't stained. And this is something that displays really well, especially if you're going to be, like a warehouse store or a grocery store, and people are going to see this. And, you want to present a clean, nice looking pallet. Then you also have B grade pallets, which is mostly what we use here. So B grade pallets are very strong, structurally sound. They have their structural integrity, but there might be a stain. They might be splintering a little bit. There's something there that takes away from the eye appeal, and because of that, they're usually not used in storefronts or in warehouse store settings because of their appearance. So these are pallets that are totally functional, totally usable. They got their structural integrity, but there might be a little bit of looks not quite there. And then you have C-grade pallets. C-grade pallets are a little more likely to fail. Sometimes you can't even get these, but they're pallets that have been used extensively. They might have some damage. They might need a little bit of repair. And these are usually pretty cheap because they're on their way out. They're at the back end of their life expectancy. And sometimes you can see these used in crafts or see them used in a warehouse setting in a limited capacity. They're not something I would consider shipping something out in, but sometimes when you're ordering B-grade pallets, you might get a C-grade pallet or two snuck in there with the rest of them. So it's important to note it because they do exist. They are something you can get on the market, and some people do use them to cut corners. So those are the 3 main grades of pallets, 1, 2, 3, or ABC. They're interchangeable. Sometimes you'll hear it referred to as either or. The last thing I want to talk about is the materials that these pallets are made out of. So pallets can be made out of all kinds of different things, the most common being wood. But there's a lot more than just wood pallets. Plastic pallets are becoming more popular. There's metal pallets in industrial application. You have pressed wood, which is like recycled wood and glue, kind of like crushed together and formed. These are really nice because they nest. You also got corrugated pallets now, right? They can make a pallet out of cardboard. Like there's all kinds of different ways to make a pallet. There's a lot of options out there, and depending on your application, it might be better to use one material over the other because these all have different capacities, right? They all have different applications. Some are cleaner, some are easier to disinfect, right? Or fumigate. Others are better for lifting heavy loads. Others are easier to strap things to. Some are easier to pick up with a forklift. So, there's a lot of options out there for pallets, but don't get too intimidating because, that standard wood 40 by 48 pallet is what most people end up using. So guys, thank you so much for watching this video and learning a little bit about pallets. If you could do us a favor, give us a lift just like a pallet, and give us a like, give us a subscribe, give us a share. Really helps the channel, and we want to get out there more great information. So thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you next week.